only received one burning question so far, but I'm sure that there will be others that will come from the group later. I did want to start this morning, or now afternoon, by having each of you introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about what PLA looks like currently at your institution. And you've got a mic that you can pass between you.
All right. Thank you much. I hope you all enjoyed that wonderful lunch. I came expecting perhaps cheese and crackers, and I'm leaving with just full dinner. So thank you very much for your attention this afternoon. I've enjoyed myself so much. I really enjoy these forums. There's an opportunity to learn even more from colleagues across the state of Texas and different levels of institutions, the 2-year colleges, the 4-year colleges, and so on. My attention, let me say my interest in prior learning assessment began as a personal interest when I was in the United States Air Force. In the United States Air Force, I was a medical technician, a surgical technician, lots and lots of experience, practical experience, working in the hospital. As Chris stated earlier, I worked under a doctor and he was teaching me all sorts of things, physical exams, and doing much more than a medical technician, surgical technician would do on the outside. With that practical experience, I lived in the state of Arkansas at the time. I was able to challenge the Arkansas State Board for licensed vocational nursing, and I passed. And that led me into a career of nursing for a little while. But more importantly, it led me into seeing the value of having practical experience that equates to the civilian sector. So as I continued my tour time in the military, I moved into positions of being a supervisor and manager, and I was able to work with my younger people under me, telling them the value of a college education, how they could use their military experience and those hours that they had gained through the training and courses that we've taken, and have a great leap towards completing their 4-year college degree or 2-year college degree. At Midwestern State University, as a director of the Bachelor's of Applied Arts and Sciences program, we've been delivering that program since 1978. And for a long while before, I guess, it became very popular to talk about PLA, we were calling it experiential learning and perhaps some other things, we were doing some things that our university really, I won't say took offense to, but it certainly was difficult to get much of the faculty and administration on board with being able to provide military folks, adults who had learning outside of the classroom or vocational technical courses from the community college. It was difficult it was a challenge getting them on board to see this as learning, valuable learning, and be able to equate and use it towards completing a 4-year bachelor's degree. At Midwestern State University, we are a COPLAC institution, part of a consortium of colleges of public liberal arts institutions. And we're the only state college in Texas to have that designation as a COPLAC institution. COPLAC institution focuses on the humanities, and the culture of our institution is more of a residential type of institution, focusing on the humanities, using that as a firm foundation. So when you try to talk about bringing in the type of learning, hours, experiences, APL credit, that we're trying to advance in our program, it becomes even more challenging. So APL at my institution, PLA, what's APL?
Assessment of prior learning.
PLA, dyslexia. PLA at the institution, instituting it really becomes a challenge. So I would say that my program, Bachelor's of Applied Arts and Sciences, is probably the center for PLA. We have great support within the institution because I think through the years we began to value, the institution has begun to value that type of learning, but we're not yet ready to fully institutionalize it in writing or as part of our strategic plan. I don't believe. When I say that we're recognized and localized the BAAS program as being the center for PLA credit and non-traditional credit, that sort of thing, I say that with the support of the university by the admissions department when they're viewing new students, adult students, non-traditional students coming into the university. They see those extra hours in the military credit. Oh, hey, maybe the BAAS degree might work for you and accelerate you being able to graduate. Or when they're in the academic support center and the advisors there see all of those excess hours in the military credit. Hey, why don't you contact the BAAS department, or let me give you their number and call. That may be a better way for you to complete your degree and finish a lot quicker. The president of our university even refers students to our program. She was out in the community once doing an interview, kind of a local television station type interview, and she was talking to the interviewee. This wasn't on camera. However their conversation started and ended, he called me and informed me that our president had asked him to contact me in our BAAS department. So she had evidently been talking with him about school and courses and classes. Maybe he was a previous student to our university 20 years ago and didn't finish for whatever reason. So he came back, great candidate. We were able to finish him out in his degree with completing what, I believe 15 to 18 hours because of how our program is set up. So that is definitely a plus when the president of a university believes in the program, believes in the PLA process, and delivers students to you. So we're very proud of that. We've come quite a long ways, and I think we do some things regarding our PLA that are obvious that you may not think of. And some of those things that we're able to do, I'm able to do, try to do with students, is collaborating with the other colleges and the universities for programs that can utilize some of the credits that perhaps their students don't finish or complete. For instance, nursing program, teaching certification programs. When students are in their programs and then they do their teaching certifications or their internships or practicums, and they realize at the first sight of blood, nursing is not for me, or the first classroom of 13-year-olds that this is not for me. They have all those hours invested. So the next question is, well, what do I do? Do I drop out? Do I quit? How do I move on? So I've collaborated with other colleges within the institution to set up a concentration or pathway for those students, and we're able to utilize those hours that the student had in their nursing program, their teaching certification program, and still accelerate that student out. So that student isn't taking 21 additional hours and ending up with 140-something hours on their transcript trying to obtain a bachelor's degree. I'd look at course substitutions. Sometimes there are courses that come in from different colleges or universities, 2 or 4 year, that may not come in as exact transfer equivalencies. So how close is this course to being able to use it as a substitute? So have a great amount of flexibility, and I'm lucky to have faculty that'll work with me on being able to sub those courses, so students aren't taking another course or an additional course or extra course. So that works. And providing testimonials. We have students that are doing great things because they've been able to accelerate their bachelor's degree process. I had two students that just graduated in May, accepted into law school. Their ultimate goal was law school or medical school or graduate school, and using the BAAS degree to accelerate their time as a stepping stone to move up to what they know their ultimate degree or career process is, has been very helpful. So in answering the original question, where are we with our our PLA process, I believe we are doing well. We let students know before they apply to the university, which means that we do evaluations on every student coming into our program before they apply, and they know exactly what we're going to use as far as their PLA. far as the military transcripts, the vocational technical hours, and all that they're bringing to us. In addition to that, we work very, very hard in looking for other certifications that they may have that may be applicable to the degree, looking at their work experiences, looking at a lot of unique aspects of their career and background, sometimes volunteer work. We don't realize that someone who volunteered for United Way and attended this nonprofit seminar and courses and classes may have ACE hours attributed to what that individual has done in that area. So we're able to just find creative ways to perhaps work with a student that will lend to additional college hours and, again, accelerate that pathway to completing a bachelor's degree.
It's my understanding this is a nuts and bolts type of session, so I'm going to ask a couple of burning questions related to what you just asked. So that sounds very hands-on. About how many staff do you have doing degree audits, and about how many new students do you get in the per semester?
I have a staff of 4, and we stay very, very, very busy. And because we do degree plans on anyone who has an interest in our BAAS program, which is offered online. So we have students all throughout the state of Texas, have students outside of the state of Texas, have students previously in the military who may be overseas somewhere. So we spend a lot of time doing degree plan evaluations. But I think adults, if we understand adult learning, adults need to see it in front of them. I want to know what you're going to take, what you're going to accept. I want to know what I need to complete to finish this degree. And when we hand that to them and they have it, I think that enhances their self-efficacy and allows them to, we make timelines, allows them to plan. They can plan around their daughter getting married. They can plan around vacations that they've had planned for a year back. So I think we're doing evaluations because we're a mid-sized university. We're not tech. We're not UTA. We have actively about 450 students in our BAAS program. So if I were to say degree plan evaluations that we do, I do at least 3 a week. So and my assistants. So.
Do you use any software that assists you?
We do.
To visualize, to help the student visualize their progress?
Our degree plans are probably more manual. We have a database, and we're working from their transcripts. They have to provide us what they need. The transcripts don't have to be official for us to do the degree plan evaluation. And they're aware that the degree plan evaluation is unofficial. Mm-hmm. There may be some changes, and the changes are usually moving courses around. I have a pretty good understanding of how courses, because I'm the approval, I have a pretty good understanding of the courses in Texas, how they're going to transfer into our program, and it's not difficult with the core curriculum that we share here in Texas. And those courses that are coming from out of state, I mentioned course substitution, so I have a great amount of flexibility with the faculty, the chair, the deans, in subbing those courses that are similar or sound close. You know, we're not taking A for B and there's no obvious connection from A to B, but we're still working with being flexible with the course substitutions.
Thanks.
Did I answer your question?
You did?
Man, I'm all around. I chase rabbits.
Whoever wants to go next.
Okay. Our institution I have thought of as perhaps leading in some areas for PLA, but what I come to understand as I come in the larger groups is that I think basically most of us are in about the same spot. We don't all share the same vocabulary, and we all seem to me to reflect the picture of the individuals and the individual programs supporting the institution actual implementation of PLA and concomitantly the competency-based education. So what I'm finding is that we have multiple paths to the PLA. We use the challenge or the basic display of the competency, both the knowledge and the skills. We use certifications in order to do competency equivalency. We do the continuing ed conversion. So they took it under non-credit continuing education conditions, but then if they become interested in credit or come to us for a credit program, we try to look at those and see if we can map them over, and we usually have the student take the end of course exam in order to achieve faculty comfort that the student has that mastery, and that takes it out of the fact that the instructor on the continuing ed side might not have met the SACS requirement for qualifications, although they're content experts, but perhaps not with the 18 graduate hours. And then the last thing that we do is the military conversion. And what I'm hearing is that almost all schools do that in addition to the traditional CLEP and the AP and the dual credit. So in terms of the students getting recognition of where they're at, I think that it's really coming to recognize where we are with society in terms of, we've had the democratization of communication through the phones. I'm still amazed that we call them phones. And now we have the democratization of learning. So no longer do you have to get into the higher education institution that is for the elite, and we have a broad public education system. But now we're recognizing that education happens everywhere. It happens in the corporate world. It certainly happens in the military world. Great example. But it happens, we have didacts among us that are just self-learners. And with what's available through YouTube and through the MOOCs, and I know that those kinds of things don't have great completion rates if you're looking at them as a system-wide tool to move X amount of people to X amount of spots, but they're certainly available and they're certainly utilized by various people, and they don't always feel a need to get that credential. So when it comes to the point in their life where career-wise or the opportunity to change direction in a career, and they're motivated, so they come and they need that piece of paper in order to advance. They need that credential. I think that's a new role, and it's really not so new, but I think that it's getting a new public focus, is that the higher ed institutions are places that the public can trust in terms of the accreditation process, that certification process. So when we look at that, and we want to be sure that our processes that we're setting up in our individual programs and at our institutional level are in compliance and meet the requirements for public acceptance, as well as for the continued accreditation that's so important in order to be able to access federal funds and all. It's causing us to push a lot of edges and a lot of administrative, more on the administrative side, I think, than in the teaching learning aspects. But I too took the framework that was provided to us by ACE and went through our institution and saw over and over again how siloed we are, how information doesn't always flow both directions. So we use those various points that I told you in different programs. We started with nursing 6 years ago and built a bridge program for people that were LVNs, were EMTs, were medics, and might have been in volunteer fire people, but had had the training. And that bridge has been successful. Now, on the nuts and bolts side, for one semester, we keep those people together in a cohort, and we have some transition courses that are parallel to what their counterparts that are the indigenous students are taking, but as they advance through it, we watch. Something else on the nuts and bolts side that we do, and we do it in every program where we have PLA admitted students. We always track their assessments to make sure that they're within 5 points of the average of the indigenous students. So we can catch quickly if an assessment tool that we're using that admits a student and has granted them credit in a particular area has failed to provide or to determine that that student has adequate foundational information. That's how we came to do the 1 semester of a couple of tailored transitional courses, is because we picked up where the people with that background of the LVN and the medic and the paramedic, and the EMT, had they had 85% of the basics or more, but there were a couple of areas, either on the professional side or on the concept side in health, where they were lacking. So we're able to pick that up in those transition courses. Thereafter, they are diffused throughout the rest of the program and completed as any other student and are basically indistinguishable. However, we do continue to track their performance, and we do that whether we do through licensure and certifications. We give credits on the for fire, for EMT, for real estate and Cisco certification. We also do conversions from the continuing ed, and we do that by a challenge exam that our 4-credit faculty actually use on the credit side. For the military, as I said earlier, we advise the person to send the transcript, or send the military history to Central Texas, who then transcripts the credit that they're to receive, and we then transfer it in. What I do see is we have a few discrepancies. We treat students differently depending on how they are able to display their competence. I think that at the institutional level, we might want to revisit some of those issues. So keeping your admissions and your registrar involved in the whole process is really important. In the case of like our military, we treat them as transfer students, and the up to 18 semester credit hours is received as credit applied, but it does not impact the GPA, and it is not counted toward their 18 hours that, as a minimum, they have to take at Collin in order to receive a Collin degree. So that becomes important, whereas the person that challenges in, actually, they again are not impacted in terms of their GPA, but the hours do apply to the 18 earned at Collin. So you can see that that's a bit of a discrepancy. On the faculty involvement side, our faculty, I think, have to be assured that they both are involved in the development or the selection of any kind of assessment tool, but that they keep in control of it, and that they're the ones that make the judgment as to whether the student receives credit, is credit ready, or not, and they send the recommendation over to the registrar's office. Our faculty are so dedicated, they've been doing it without compensation, which I think needs to change as we scale up, and without, but they do earn service hours. They also have incorporated so that they develop both the written assessment of knowledge, and in some cases we access known national tests such as the NACE or the PB in the nursing, and the licensure and certification kinds of exams. But they also have developed their own scenarios for skills performance, and using the simulation lab, our faculty actually have gone through the protocols with complex scenarios that would mimic what you might encounter in clinical, and they themselves get taped and rated by their own faculty to make sure that the scenarios are realistic and complete. and that the rating guides are complete, that we haven't left out an important element in the protocols. Once they do that, that's available then, and we have 8 scenarios in like the help for the nursing. And when the students take those, if they fail, this is policy and across the institution, they're allowed to challenge 3 times. The first time, if they have failed that some aspect, they're coached or mentored and given practice in the simulation lab. The second time, the same thing, but we bring in at least a second faculty rater because we don't want there to be bias in the fact that that's your student now and you've been mentoring them. And again, we coach them based on the diagnostics of what that person is needing. And the third time, if they would fail, then they're denied access to the program through that route. They're not denied access if they can meet the other selective criteria, but they can't do it through the challenge. And I think that's in keeping with like 2 repetitions of a course on the regular credit side. So I think that an important part that goes into institutionalizing is that we recognize and set up an assessment fee so that the faculty that are being paid coming over to our testing center and doing both the rating of the scenarios and the scoring of the content, that they are recognized for their time and their effort beyond just their enthusiasm and their passion. And I think too that there should be a reasonable fee for credit awarded. And both that keeps the spurious person, the person that, and I will confess to having done this in undergraduate school, where I took every club I could because it was available. And there was no consequence if you didn't get the credit. So I'd go read the encyclopedia, run over, take the test. Anyway, that we don't want that because, you know, as somebody once said to me, this is not a degree mill. So we don't want to run degree mills, and we want to make sure that there is experience because we want student success as the student progresses through the program. And we want our name to carry the student that's proficient as they graduate. So there's a lot of motivation on both sides, I think. The fees can be used for multiple purposes, not just the reward to the person who's putting the time and effort to do the assessments, but in terms of the award of credit, which we do when we do a continuous ed conversion, we charge a small fee for the credit. But that can go toward professional development of your faculty in your area, can go for keeping your equipment and your programs up to date, like our simulation lab, for instance. And it can be used to create innovation challenges to help spur the next area that's brought to PLA or to the competency based. So those are kind of some of the nuts and bolts things. I will say that I'm very interested in learning the various programs that have been have a bridge, is what I call it, when you can use prior learning assessment, because we've got about 7 areas. I think I mentioned Cisco and the real estate. We've got the nursing, we've got the paramedic, the EMT really, and the emergency services professions, and we have the, we're looking at surge tech as another area that we're bringing in. So I'm interested, I know that we have criminal justice, and we've got, I know Austin Community College does a lot in the IT area. What are some of the other areas that we've got represented?
Mark. Sorry. Other areas represented?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes, for, in the health sciences, we have bridges for CNA to patient care tech to CNA,
Okay.
CNA to LVN, LVN to ADN.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Manufacturing,
Okay.
industrial manufacturing, electronics.
And is that Amarillo?
I'm sorry.
What is your
SBC.
institution?
South Plains College.
Okay.
I remember some automotive, I remember some diesel, and I'm talking military.
Right.
You already referenced CIS. Say again? Which one? Maybe some CAD,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe some CAD.
Okay, that's great, because that's a whole other area. Okay.
Okay, Chris, tell us what you know about Alamo College, where they are.
Well, for Alamo, I'm actually just hitting, next week would be my first year, getting there for that, my anniversary. But right now, we have just started a PLA committee. It convened in December for the first time, right after our presentation we did there. So they found that I was some kind of knowledgeable person about it. So I was tagged for that. But we actually worked for a few months doing some individual work on each campus to see to look at faculty attitude, faculty knowledge. We will reconvene in 2 weeks to see what has come out of those studies that we've done on the campuses. But right now, we've already started to draft material for the catalog for 2017-2018 because we're hoping to spin out some of our areas. But again, we have 5 different colleges within the Alamo system, so each one is individually accredited. So it's going to have to go with each individual college on what they want to use for PLA or CPL based on how well the faculty senates feel comfortable with certain things from that. I think unanimously they are looking at doing portfolios. We may be going with Kale with their project on that one with learning counts. So that may be an easy one there, but then everything else is really going to be roll up the sleeves work with the different programs. And we're trying to get that low-hanging fruit, those programs that already have certifications, national credentials, those are going to be some of our first ones. And then with the military, Fort Sam and Lackland are right there, so it's going to be very simple for us to work with those groups within that area.
We're using our success with our pilots that have kind of come along, as I said, through the silos, to build faculty confidence in the process, and the fact that we can demonstrate through our student scores that they've kept a pace with the indigenous students that came in the traditional way. So we're inviting this fall, we've been trying to leak that information out all this past academic year in a kind of subtle way, so that we're not threatening to the faculty like, oh, this is going to be shoved down our throats. And we're trying to lead with the fact that it's an invitation for faculty to review their programs and see whether some of the coursework might be amenable to this, to build a bridge, showing the success of the other programs that are kind of sprinkled throughout some of the different divisions, so that again they see it as invitational and an opportunity. So this fall we're planning to invite additional leads or additional pilots, and eventually it won't be even referred to as like a pilot, it'll just be the way we do business. Now we have increased the presence in the catalog for the students. Any program where we're doing it, if you're reading, it'll tell the student, both online and in the printed catalog, that there's this opportunity, do you have the following? And it's presented much like the selective admissions criteria. So one of our goals is to further institutionalize and to look at some of the issues if one program is treating their students a little differently when it comes down to the way we transcript. And speaking of that, I wanted to bring up an issue. We sometimes don't apply the credit until the student actually applies for the degree. So that can be late in the game. They're able to do it early, but it can be late in the game. And then we sometimes find that a student doesn't meet a prereq for which they've already demonstrated success in all the coursework, for which the prereq was the prerequisite. But we have not yielded as an institution, and we make the person satisfy that prereq. So then they have to often use some mechanism like CLEPing or taking the end of course exam. I find that we have shifted that burden, or we have placed that burden on the student instead of as an institution recognizing that it's happened more than once, and we can address that earlier in the process and/or have a more reasonable approach to it, like, is not subsequent dependent performance an adequate demonstration that they have the underlying basics? So could that not either then be given as credit in lieu of having additional steps or hoops? Because to me, those are the roadblocks or the potholes in the process. So we want to remove those kinds of things. I think that'll take some institutional focus to do that. And faculty will, that they feel comfortable. And so they cannot ever be left out of the process or the discussions, because it's really kind of a continual work in progress in terms of gaining both their confidence and that they control the process and they control that award of their credit.
Thank you. When I think about my university, and keep in mind that I'm talking about a four-year institution and applying PLA credit, we're in the I feel that we're in the effective practice stage, but again, that is localized to my program. But I am proud that the rest of the university recognizes that, and the weakness may be that PLA is not as applicable as we would like to see, or benefiting students in other programs that it might be able to benefit. And one of the things that I've learned, and you might want to keep this in mind also, as I work with PLA, I always have to keep in mind the culture, the mission of our university. And again, because we're a co-plaque university, the focus of our university is on residential students, that traditional student, we have a little bit of leeway with the adult non-traditional student in the BAAS program to work pretty creatively. But I know, because of the mission and culture of my university, that probably going too far or CBE is not an area that we're yet ready to embrace. And it's going to take small steps to get there. As Kathleen stated earlier, we want to make sure, again, as we're implementing PLA programs, and again, I'm talking about the bachelor's degree level, that we want to make sure that we are not moving as degree mills. And one of the things that we keep in mind, again, is just the academic rigor, the integrity of our program, what we're accepting in. For instance, military credit, ACE credit. We streamline the process. My goal for my students is I want to streamline this process. The worst thing that we can do, and I hate saying this because we lose students, is sending them here, there, and everywhere. So we really streamline the process in our BAAS program. As I stated earlier, we are able to do the degree plan evaluations and work with the student. The student knows what they're taking. It's personalized, it's flexible. We can sometimes move things around on the degree plan as we need to. Can't bother the core, that's constant. But those other areas, we have great amount of flexibility as long as the student is taking and working the hours that are required. So I've had military students mainly, that have come into our program, and all they needed to complete to finish the degree, a bachelor's degree, was 30 hours to meet our residential requirement. And those 30 hours, that student has flexibility to take in almost any manner they so desire. Going full-time, going part-time, taking one class a semester. We're looking at the timeline and we're working with what the student is able to do. That's a weakness, the residential requirement. And we may be able, that's my next large step, may be able to work around that a bit, as we already have with some of our BAAS students. But a lot of the PLA credit we accept in, as Kathleen stated earlier, does not count towards GPA requirement, does not count towards residential hours. So the student in my program, at minimum, is going to have to take at least 30 hours to meet our residential requirement. And I've had students do that. Believe it or not, I've had students that have probably met the requirements of our degree plan, and the student has to take 30 hours, and that's just fluff. That's those are 30 hours of fluff.
SACS has that requirement of a minimum of like 25% of your award.
Exactly.
That's required.
Exactly, and some of it is that the student has to take it in residence on the campus, or the last hours, or however. So we're working with that a little bit. We don't know where we'll go. Another, I won't call it blockage or challenge, I won't call it a blockage, which may be a challenge, and I think we can work it to our advantage also, is with the PLA credit that we award the student has to have completed at least 9 hours in our program. So a student doesn't come in and we award this credit and then they move off with, 24 or 36 hours of excess. So the student has to be in our program, BAAS program, and has to have completed at least 9 hours before I go back and award those hours to credit to that student's transcript. I also have a committee. I don't want you to think that I'm kind of working rogue and independently, but I do enjoy the flexibility and many times having almost the last say on the PLA and the BAAS students. But I do have a BAAS committee made up, comprised of a faculty member from each of the 6 colleges on our campus. And because a lot of times they're busy in their own disciplines, they trust me, they defer to me, but we are coming to a consensus on many of the things that we talk about or that they're discussing with us. One last thing I want to mention is regarding PLA and being able to work with students who may not have, we have these students at the university level, I'm not sure how well this goes on at the community college level, who may have gone from major to major to major, and they have all of these excess hours and credits. I mentioned earlier that because of our program and because of the flexibility, being able to collaborate with other colleges on my campus, we were just able to come up with some concentrations in each of those colleges that would allow the student to be able to use those hours that they didn't use or finish their major requirements and graduate that student. One of the things we did not want to do, and our provost was very concerned about this, was the excess hours that students were having as they were graduating from our university. And a lot of times students weren't able to, didn't want to finish those hours, didn't want to go back and complete those hours. Sometimes the GPA was a bit low. And one of the barriers I think initially that we had in our BAAS program, and I was just able to get this changed, was that students who were currently in a major at our university, the nursing students, the teaching search students, so students that had those excess hours and wanted to transfer to our program had to have a 2.75 GPA. We wanted to make sure that we were keeping up the rigor, the credibility of our program. 2.75 GPA. We found that to be quite problematic, and we were hurting students. We were blocking students. Students who were in a nursing program and probably eased out of their program because their GPA was not where it should be, or they didn't pass maternal nursing course, and they're no longer in the program. It didn't make sense for them to go back and try to repeat courses to bring their GPA up to the 2.75 standard to come into our program. So that was a huge, I think, barrier to being able to graduate students, to allow them a quick access to a bachelor's degree, and to be able to finish out, graduate, move on with their life, get jobs, go to graduate school, whatever their plans were. So we were able to, through my committee, BAAS committee, and we were all consistent about this, we were able to we wanted to lower our GPA down to at least 2.5 for those students. So we're still maintaining rigor and academic integrity, the vision of the program, what's that word I'm looking for? Give me a word.
Mission.
The mission.
Program objectives.
Program objectives and whatnot. So I think that's a great thing we did for students. We weren't blocking students from being able to finish a bachelor's degree at Midwestern State University. We weren't seeing as many students dropping out because they were just fed up with their program. So just wanted to make sure that those of you who are at the community college level, I know you're working and encouraging students to continue on to the four-year university. Just want you to know that there are options for them at many of our four-year institutions, and being able to finish a bachelor's degree with those vocational technical courses that normally do not transfer.
Okay, so I've got a question for each of you. Let's say 5 minutes each, unless, you want to negotiate among yourself, okay? We've heard a lot of discussion about a series of interventions, a series of things that need to be in place for a successful PLA program on a campus. So, for people who are just now getting started, who are trying to look down the road and put something together that's built to succeed, what are your recommendations? And get ready, it's a multi-parter, so take notes, okay? What are your recommendations regarding what kinds of things you need to have set up on the front end for a prospective student so that they know that these things are possibilities for them to pursue and that they don't have to count on their own perseverance, right, on a case-by-case basis to have their PLA evaluated? Secondly, what, in terms of infrastructure, which stakeholders need to be involved at the institution in setting up this PLA program? You've talked a little bit about some advisors, you've talked a little bit about assessment, you've talked a little bit about department chairs, but give us the list, right, of all the people who would need to be at the table when you're getting started. And then, Kathleen, because you had talked about assessment, I know you'll have information on this, but the other two of you as well, what are you doing to assess the impact of the awarding of PLA on students' retention, graduation, first-time pass rates, on exams for licensure, those kinds of things? Okay, so you rule the world, you're starting PLA, what would you do? And let's start with Chris. You've got the mic.
Well, I haven't really been student facing a lot on this, but from what I've done talking with a number of groups around the country is that you want your students to know what's going on, but at the same time, if you're advertising to them, you need to be honest with them what this is and what it's not. Because there's a true disconnect on this point here. And I'm going to give a perfect example. I was at my son's football game last fall, was eavesdropping on a conversation of two military gentlemen here, and one was like, I can't believe I'm going to this college and I can't get any of my credits to go through. ACE just totally screwed me up. And I heard that, I was like, wow, okay, great. But the guy was not advised well. You're coming out of a medical background, I think it was healthcare area, but he's applying for a business program. There's not a lot of connections somewhere in there. We have to be able to say, it's not just receive military credit for your service. That's not it, and we have to be very honest with that, and we should not be afraid to say that. We need to let them know, you make a choice for your program. If you're going into criminal justice and you were a tanker, you were in an armored tank, there's not a lot of crossover on that standpoint, and we need to be ready to say that instead of trying to break our neck to find a way for it to connect. We need to say, it's not there. Because, again, it is open for them to make the decision for their program, but it's also not for us to, quote, get into what I call the marketization of higher education, because that's not good. And for us, we look bad. The other part is, if you know that student is already struggling when it comes through your process, and this is the admissions or advising process, and they're trying to get out as many classes as they can, you have to be honest as well and say, you know what, you need to take this course, because this was said earlier in the group. I actually had a student come to me and say, well, hey, I heard that you've read for the Middle Eastern History exam, CLEP exam. This is my background, what should you do? I'm looking like, you need to take the class. And I wasn't even teaching the class at the time. I said, please, you need to take the class. This is how much stuff is on this exam. Are you ready for that? No, you're not. Take the class. It's going to benefit you. But, he had in his mind, because of his background in I think it was civil affairs in the Army, he thought he could actually do well with what he's done in the Middle East. That's a little bit different, because when we talk about Middle Eastern history class, we are taking it way back, not to where you've just been right here at this snapshot in this moment. So again, when we're working and advising with students, we have to be honest. So that's the first thing I would like to do with the advisors. You know, it's not just the point of trying to make the student happy and trying to get them in. It's really working with them to be honest and say, what's going to work for you? What's going to help you get through your program? Because what happens is, like that conversation that took place over here, they're going to blame you, and they're going to blame me as an ACE representative, where we set them up for failure, where we really didn't. We tried to do the best we can to advise them on that. The other is bringing all parties to the table. And I think everyone on the campus needs to be made aware. And it's not just the point of that they actually have to have a say-so at the table. They need to be made aware. But the people who have the power to make the decisions to get things moving, they definitely have to be at your table. If not, it won't happen. So for the academic leaders, the dean sometimes cannot send an envoy and that envoy sit there, because if that envoy does not have any decision-making powers, you've already put a huge kink in that process there, and that assembly line that will not work. So there's your first little cog missing from there. So they have to take it seriously, and if it takes you just to sit down and to educate them, which we will have to do, which means we have to then educate ourselves or find someone to educate that group for us, then we have to get to that point. And let's see, what was the last one? Impact. That's an excellent question, and I get that so many times when I've actually been out in the field. And when I heard Kathleen was doing that, I definitely wrote it down, because we have to find more people, more institutions that are actually tracking this. But to be on that brutally honest side of things, how many times are we tracking this on our own campuses? So am I going to go back and say, you know, I know Roger taught world history or Western Civ, and by the time they came to my class, these students were lacking. Did I go back and talk to Roger? Did the chair go back and talk to Roger? We have to do the same thing on our campuses for our classes that we're asking other people to do for the type of credits that's actually coming in. So I think if we're going to ask for it, we need to be consistent about it and get it going. Again, so you guys can see, this is why I like to be run out of town a lot. So no, I'm joking. From that. One other thing is the mindset really has to change. And I wrote down a couple of things as these two ladies were talking, because I was laughing about something. I had a president at a small private college here in Texas, I'm not going to say where, who called us in, not AC, it was another group I was with. And the first thing he said when he opened up the meeting, I do not want to give away the bond. And so what does that tell everyone in the room? He's not really ready to start openly talking about anything at all. And so I'm like, well, why are we here? You just brought me to a nice little section of North Dallas, I'm sorry, to have good dinner and everything else, but you told me you're not going to be serious about this, not at all. So I had a nice evening in Grapevine at some little diner thing. Oh, I gave it away. No, I'm joking. Second thing is, and I'm trying to remember his last name. I think it was Jerry Collins at Florida State, the two-year college in Jacksonville. He talks about institutional snobbery, and I love that little saying. I wish we can coin it. But he talks about what we do not do on our own campuses. Again, we need to be ready to have the conversation. So how many people in the room know about challenge exams on your campus?
Well, yeah.
How many of them have ever been validated? Oh. But we're in education. We're supposed to do this. And so, and as Delores was talking, why not just walk over to the education department, talk to someone in Ed Stats and say, hey, can you look this over? We won't do that. And so we set up an exam, and sometimes we set the students up for failure because we don't want to give up the course. So we make it as hard as we can, and it's not fair to the students. So, or even really fair to the faculty members as well, to make it challenging in that sense. We need a challenge exam, but we can't go out of our way trying to block the students. So we need to get rid of the institutional snobbery. So.
Okay. I thought I would start with the stakeholders who need to be at the table. So you need your leadership, and you need it for resources and to generate the enthusiasm to set the agenda that this is going to be done, that this is okay to be done, that's not institutional snobbery that's going to keep it at bay, that it's wanted. So that gives the message to the rest of the field. You need to start with your faculty in terms of the buy-in, that they feel in control of that process of accrediting and that things have been vetted. that if there's the selection of a national instrument for like assessment and knowledge, that somebody's actually looking at course content and making sure that there's alignment, good, strong alignment with that. Or it may be fine for its purposes, but for your purpose of awarding credit for your course comparability, that's not an appropriate instrument. So you need your faculty environment and the involvement, but they also need to be assured that they will control that process, remain in control of the recommendations of credit received on the case-by-case basis. As Chris, I think, pointed out, that's really always coming down to a case-by-case decision. You need staff of faculty advising, and the regular student development advisors have to be knowledgeable across the various divisions and for the admissions and the registrar's office in terms of what the policies are, because you want to be very upfront, very clear to your students. And those, to the extent that you can, those kinds of policies need to be documented in your online presence for both on your program pages and on your institutional pages with regard to what the policies and practices are. You need to involve your curriculum departments or processes if you do not have a assigned delegated central control of curriculum. And the reason is you need to keep in compliance. You need to address the issues related to accreditation, both from the state level and the SACs. And many of the programs, the workforce programs where we actually do the prior learning assessment, there's an external accreditor in addition to the SACs and the state. So you need to pay attention to those. Faculty and the program administrator per se should be very aware and sensitive about those matters, but you need to be aware and listen and plan for that. You need to involve the business office because you need a sustainable model. It's great to pull off a pilot, but if the institution itself can't sustain your practices, then you need to look at them in the context or the culture of the environment there. You also need to look at the culture and the context of the larger environment of the wherever your institution resides, so that something that might be well supported, like in Collin with Fort Hood with regard to the military practices, might not be a known quantity in another community, and so there might need to be some education, and again, to integrate that into your online presence and descriptions and your quote catalogs. And I think catalog is like the phone, another outdated term, because we really have approved degree plans and approved policies and processes, but we don't. The catalog concept is a little out of date. I think all of it does come back to the point that Chris makes about what are we actually doing on our campuses. I think this whole movement, I know, can help our institution be truer to our mission about the shift from delivery of content, which has now been underway for more than 40 years in terms of deliver by objective, and now really look at your outcomes, no matter what the modality, no matter how one arrives there. If the student is proficient, if the student has a certain degree of mastery that's being attested to by the powers that be at the institution. So I think those are my main points.
Okay, Delores, we're gonna wrap it up in the last minute or two.
All right, thank you much. The stakeholders, at minimum, we all know that we need to have our key players, president and VP, involved in the process if we're looking at implementing PLA. So there has to be some involvement at the top. I would also say consider the mission, strategic plan, and the culture of the university, because that will certainly dictate where your top administration is and what they will and will not allow to occur on the campus. And connect with faculty. You need involved faculty who are interested, who understand adult education, non-traditional education. I sought those faculty members I knew who did not have a traditional linear line to completing their doctorate or in their profession, that understood being in the military, understood working as they worked on their degrees also. So I think those are important people that understand non-traditional, this wavering path that many of our adult students have. And again, having a BAAS committee that is working with you also. You know, we don't get much done in higher education if we don't have a coalition with us or behind us. So you need a committee, and we need to do good work. Again, we talked about the academic rigor and the integrity of the programs and what we're accepting into the degrees. So we need to make sure that we're maintaining the standards and looking at what we need to be looking at. And testimonials. I've provided testimonials. We follow our students somewhat. We hear back from our students. Students going to law school, that's what we want to hear. When faculty hear that we have great students who were accepted into law school, who were accepted into medical school, that went on to graduate school, that's what we want of our students. And the students who get promotions and moved into other jobs, those sorts of things, increase their income, got jobs. So we try to keep up with that and those students and present them back as live testimonials to the faculty and those who seem to be against this PLA type credit assessment. And campus support, not just from the top, but from the folks who actually interface with students. Admissions, registrar, academic support folks, the academic advisors from the different colleges across the campus, where they see these students with all these excess hours and they're doing their degree plan, and they say, oh, well, it's going to take you 3 years, 4 years to finish this degree in business. Have you thought about? And the student will come over to our program, and sometimes we can still work business, and the student will be able to finish with a business minor. So those are the stakeholders that I would see involved. So what about the students getting there? I always tell, starting your program, we need to many times start where the student is. There needs to be full disclosure. I've heard from students so many times who end up in our program, well, I went to so-and-so and they wouldn't take this, or they told me this, and when I applied, this happened, and none of that stuff occurred. So full disclosure. We need to be honest with students. My students are adult students, and we don't have any secrets. You know, if we can, we can. I'll let you know. If we can't, I'll let you know. If I'm not sure, I'll let you know. And you know what I'm not sure about. So we want to make sure that we have the full disclosure for students, and we're talking with them openly and honestly about what we can do for them, what's going to apply. Sometimes students need a translation. When we tell them, you take this course, yes, MSU will accept this course, but they don't understand that it's not accepted probably as a core class, as it's not accepted where they thought it might be. So we need to do some translation for them also. And we talked about the impact. How are we measuring our PLA credits and how that we accept in on our degrees or programs from students, and how are they measuring with other students? Well, again, our tracking is our GPA. Because the student has to complete at least 30 hours with us, we've got a good 30 hours to see what their GPA is looking like, and we can see that the GPA of the students who we've collected PLA on, and the non-traditional student who've gone through the traditional programs, how they're looking. I can say that our GPA is higher or the same as other colleges and other majors. We certainly track that because we know we get that flame back a lot of times regarding our programs and regarding our students. So, and I understand that each university is different. Most of you are community colleges here, and my perspective, again, is coming from the university level. But I will tell you that we do need to do something different. Education is not as it was 20 and 30 years ago, and there's so much learning. We're not the only holders of education and learning, and we need to understand that students are gaining a lot of information. It doesn't necessarily have to come within the halls of academia, and we need to recognize that, we need to assess that, in a manner that's going to maintain the academic integrity of the university and the programs, but also respect the knowledge and learning that the student has obtained also.